I love this style of fishing, you know. Super tough, but really rewarding. We're here at Hallcroft, and during the winter months, there's a lot of very, very good feeder anglers that all fish a league here. It's a pairs league, and these are the target. Skimmers ranging from sort of 10 ounce to 2 pound. Little feeders, small hooks, light lines, everything's really refined. And I'm on the bank of Bridgepool today, where I just want to have a little bit of a practice session, run through a few things, hopefully get everything right for the weekend's match. Match at the weekend, like I say, I'll be attended by some fantastic anglers. You've got England internationals, both float and feeder England internationals. So you know you've got to be top of your game. It's a weight match. Carp only count as a pound because primarily it's all about catching silverfish. But at the end of the series, just a few ounces can make a massive difference. So you've got to get everything bang on. I've caught a few skimmers today. Like I say, the fishing, it's tough, but when you get a few bites, it's really rewarding. And while I'm here, I'm going to run through for you guys exactly what I'm doing. So if you are out fishing for some commercial silvers during the colder months, hopefully we can put you on the start line. So we're going for a 50-50 mix of groundbait. First ingredient, it's the Swim Stim Amino Black. I love this groundbait. It's a pellet-based groundbait, very fine, which is really important, very dark, very important. Mixed with the Swim Stim Silvers. This is the dark, and the good thing about this silverfish groundbait is it's very, very fine once again, but it's got quite a good quantity of fish meal in there. Now, the silvers in commercial fisheries love fish meal. They're eating pellets all year round, and I think no matter what time of year, you've got to include a little bit of fish meal in your mix just because they're so used to it. So as I say, a 50-50 mix. I don't need loads of groundbait. I'm going to use just a pint of each groundbait mixed together. So it's not a massively expensive day. Nip the corn off that bag. And I'm just going to measure my groundbait out because I think that's important. And I'm going to go for this bait tub full. Might be a litre this bait tub actually, but it's close enough to what we want. We just want a 50-50 mix. You can smell that silverfish. It's very, very sweet in comparison to the Swim Stim, which has got a bit more of a pellety smell about it. So there we go, we've got equal parts in there. And now, you've seen this before a million times, just adding water to groundbait, you know, we've all done that, but what I want to make sure, because these groundbaits are very pellety based, is that there's a lot of water in here. I don't want bits floating up all over the place. I want to make sure that there's a lot of water in this groundbait. And this first mix will be very, like, stodgy, you know, so it's very stodgy and heavy. I'm not mixing it to a slop. I just want it stodgy and heavy because I want every particle to have loads of water in there, but I still want it dry on my side tray. That means I can alter the consistency throughout the day, which I'll be showing you as I'm fishing. But to start with, I just want to get a start on those particles, get the water fully absorbed, and then in about 10 minutes, I'll probably add a little bit more water and then whack it through this riddle. Now, if we come in here, this riddle, it's got slightly smaller holes than a standard groundbait or maggot riddle. That is because I want that fine mix. So everything's going to go through this riddle. I'm going to make that mix super fine. Fine, dark groundbait is the name of the game at this time of year for commercial silvers. As with any style of fishing at this time of year, location is massive. You've got to find where the fish are. So I've visited this venue a few times and I know roughly the areas that you're going to start catching fish. I'd like to fish on a day like today, just past pole line, so 13, 14 meters, something like that. And that has been a brilliant place for catching fish, you know, but causing a little bit of commotion on the bank filming, so I've just pushed a little bit further out. I've sticked up at 17 metres. Now, measuring sticks are really important when you're feeder fishing. It gives you a really good guide, and especially on venues like here at Hallcroft where there's very few snags, I don't need to have a plumb around before the start of a match to try and find an area that's absolutely spot on. I know that the bottom out there is pretty flat, there's no snags, it's all a very uniform depth. The last thing I want to be doing is chucking a bomb out at the start or a straight lead, causing commotion in the water. It's a flat, calm day today. If I start casting out a bomb, all I'm going to do is start spooking fish. So by just at the start of a session, whipping the line around the measuring sticks, I can clip up without even breaking the water's surface, and also it gives me a reference point. So I always like to mark my line anyway next to the line clip, but say for instance I want to move out a little bit further, or if I find that that distance isn't the right distance, I can always come back and measure the mount. Also helps massively for when I'm fishing another session. So I know that from previous sessions, certain distances have been really good on a venue. The last thing I want to be doing is guessing. So I don't want to be, if I was to chuck out today, I'd be sort of guessing. I'd be thinking, is it 15, is it 20 metres? But now I know it's exactly 17 metres, I can come back to this sort of same area, start catching at that same area. I can start straight away from the beginning of the match at that distance. While we're waiting for bites, something that I feel is really important, timing your bites. I've not done it because I've been talking to you guys, but I've got my little stopwatch. This is probably the fancier side of stopwatches. This is a catch clicker, but a stopwatch is great for this sort of thing. By starting your stopwatch as you cast out, it gives you a really good guide to your bite times. So a lot of people think that a stopwatch is a bit of a gimmick when they're feeder fishing, but trust me, especially in a match, using a stopwatch, it makes you use your time really efficiently. So most of my bites today are coming within 2.5, 3 minutes. It's actually really interesting that I probably don't even need to concentrate until 2 minutes into the bite, into the cast, because I'm not getting bites much quicker than that. But between 2 and 3 minutes, that's the time I need to start looking at my tip. So it makes sense to use a stopwatch, get a feel for that, because like I said, I've worked out that most bites are coming between 2 and 3 minutes. If I was to start guessing it in my head, I might reel in after 1.5 minutes. I've missed that window of opportunity then if I was to do that. And likewise, it's pointless me leaving it out there for 7 or 8 minutes, because I could have had 2 or 3 casts in that time and got that maximum efficiency with my feeder in the water. I could have made the most of that 2 to 3 minute bite time a couple of times. So using the stopwatch, really important. When I'm setting my tip, something that I think is critical as well, I don't want a massive bend in my tip. So if we can get down on my quiver tip there, I like to have as little bend in that tip as possible. So if you've got a really nice glass tip as we've got today, we've got 1/2 ounce glass tip, I like to have the line tight but the tip straight. See a little indication there, and that means that that tip is at its most sensitive. I'm going to see all the little line bites, little indications. If it's skimmers nudging around my feeder, I'm going to see them. If a little fish picks up the bait, I'm going to see the little indication. And I think, especially on a calm day like today, I just like to fish like that. And if there is any little bit of toe, just let that little bit of toe tighten up that quiver tip. And it might bend round 1 inch or so with a bit of toe on the water. But that's how I like to start, with that tip nice and straight, but the line tight to the feeder. I think that's the most sensitive that setup's ever going to be. Kit wise, it's all about finesse. So let's start with the rod. I've got a Free Spirit Feeder Light 10 footer, a really soft rod, and I've fitted the 1/2 ounce glass tip in the end. I want to see every little indication. So even if it's a little line bite or a little roach bite, I want to see what's happening in my swim, and that soft tip helps with that. Reel wise, we've got an Akuma Invicta. This is the 5000 size, suits this rod perfectly. And on the reel, we've got 016 Suffix Advance. It's quite a light line for feeder fishing, but it's robust, and that light line is going to help when we're casting those really small feeders out. We'll talk about feeders in a second, but first of all, I want to talk about the end rig. So we've got that 016 line. It runs all the way through our rod rings, and I tie about 1.5 meters of really heavy fluorocarbon, 12-pound fluorocarbon, to the end of that 016. It's not necessarily a shock leader, it's just let's call it a leader, because it's not taking any shock of any description. Onto that fluorocarbon, I put my feeder link, which is going to house my feeder. Obviously, a lot of anglers now are using feeder links. That could just be a snap link swivel, but whatever's housing your feeder is going to run along that 12-pound fluorocarbon. It's obviously really durable. Then at the bottom, I loop back my 12-pound fluorocarbon and I tie a 3-turn water knot. Creates a really strong, neat little barrel-shaped knot. And that knot is what my feeder link or snap link swivel is going to butt up against. So there's no weight there whatsoever. There's no feeder beads or stots on the line that's going to add weight to the rig. It's just a little knot there. Once you've tied that knot, you have to cut one of the tags off and you'll be left with one long tag. And I use 20 centimeters of that thick fluorocarbon below that knot, and that's what I attach my hook length to. So just a little sort of like loop to loop arrangement below that. We can create a really simple, neat feeder rig with nothing on the line. So it makes it perfect for catching these smaller fish that they don't like the weight on the line. Hook length wise, the rules in the league that I'm fishing here at Hallcroft are 50 centimeters below your feeder. I like to start with 60 centimeters below my feeder. So I've got 010, I've got a size 18 hook, really light terminal tackle. And where rules allowed, I'd probably go as short as 20 centimeters below my feeder. But some days longer can be better, you know, so 70 or 80 centimeters to create a nice slow fall of the hook bait. You can catch a few fish doing that. So you've got to vary that as the day goes on. While we've got the gear out, we'll talk about feeders. So the feeder that I seem to have quite a lot of success on is this old Drennan wire cage. 3 square, weighs 12 gram, nice small feeder. Small feeders are the name of the game when you're doing this sort of fishing. That is a beautiful little feeder, the all-rounder, I'm going to call it. That catches loads of fish. But different feeders have got different roles, and I've got a couple on my side tray that do a few different things. So we'll start with this little fella. He's plastic, he's still a cage feeder, but he's not as open as that wire feeder, which means that I can ram bait in this feeder, and I make sure that it gets to the bottom. Create a nice little tight parcel of bait on the bottom rather than having bits floating all up in the water. So if I want to pin fish down, that's the feeder I'll use. 12 gram again, lovely little feeder. If I really want to be attractive though, I'll pick up a little rocket feeder. Now, the reason I use these feeders, not only do they cast beautifully, but the base of these feeders, obviously they've got a weight in the base, and that weight in the base just helps hold in ground bait if I want to make it really sloppy. So if I want a really cloudy mix or a really damp mix, I'll use one of these rocket style feeders. That's a Nisa rocket, obviously slightly on the bigger side to what we'd use in the winter, but a great feeder if the fish are really having it or you want to put a bit of bait in. This is one of the feeders that we get from Europe. Beautiful little feeder, casts like a bullet, 10 gram, lovely feeder. Some shops in the UK are selling these. I think Wickersley Tackle are selling these style of feeders. They're a beautiful little feeder. Let's load up the feeder and show you how we're fishing, because that's the most important part. I've been altering my ground bait texture throughout the day. I like to do that. I think it makes a massive difference to what you're catching. So play around with your ground bait texture, adding more water to the mix. That can be a real benefit. Double pinky, fantastic bait, all times of years, but obviously especially in the winter for skimmers, it's a fantastic bait. I've got a tub of water on my side tray, and I'll just pick up a little bit of water and flick it into my ground bait in a little pile. That creates a little area that is obviously a lot damper than the rest, and I can fish with really damp ground bait if I pick up a feeder fill the feeder from that little pile, or I've got round the edges where I've got some dry ground bait, and I'll mix it up throughout a session. So just at the minute, we're catching on not super wet ground bait, but stodgy, I'm going to say. So I'm going to load my next feeder full up, I'm going to put in 3 or 4 casters, 3 or 4 pinkies in that little pile. And this is the best way of doing it. You do it as you go. I don't want to scatter a pint of casters in my ground bait and I'm stuck with that. I just want to fill up each feeder full. So do it as I go, nip it in there. I'm not pushing it in really hard. I want a bit to fall out on the way down. I think that is perfect to catch my next skimmer. He's on, isn't he? Get in there. Yeah? It always amazes me, you know, how important time of day is for catching fish. Always seems that just as that light starts to fade, the slightly bigger stamped fish start feeding, and that's the case today. So something that I've found really important is regulating your bait, because what you don't want is when them fish do start feeding, a mountain of bait out there. Obviously we're talking cold water fishing situations, and maybe in the summer we want to build up a big bed of bait, wait for those big fish to turn up, that arrival. But there's going to be maybe an hour and a half window at this time of year, just when the light starts to fade, where you start catching. Last thing we want is a load of bait on the bottom, because one, the fish might just back off and not come back, but also when they do start feeding, we don't want loads of options for them. We just want our hook bait really, and a few little bits of loose feed. So dark mix, regulating your bait as you're casting out, little feeders, it's always the way to go, you know, on these hard winter's days. A little bright bait as well. So whatever bait I'm fishing today, I'm either tipping with a pinky or fishing pinkies on their own, because fluoro pinkies, they just seem to ping out in the water in these clear water conditions a little bit better, and the fish seem to pick up on them. We want quick bites. We want to get our bite as fast as we can. Hardly putting that bait in the feeder. Plop it out. Plop. There we go. Gently sink the line. Underneath Mr. Duck. There we go, that's all sunk. And we're ready for our next skimmer. What a mega little workout we've had today. The match is in a couple of days' time, and if we catch as many skimmers as we've caught today in the match, I'll be very happy. We've learnt a few things as well, so key points to take away from the day for me. Timing is everything, so obviously right time of day on the right line, that is key. That really fine dark ground bait mix, and altering the consistency, because at some points today we've caught using dry ground bait, but other points we've caught using really light ground bait, like wetted down, so it splats almost on the surface, makes a really nice cloud. But also the bright bait, using that pinky just to ping out everything, has been really good today. Let's hope we can catch a load of these in the match at the weekend.